Okay, so my name is Sue Muir and I'm a teacher of the deaf here at Send Success Outreach Service. I'm also joined by Anne Guymer, my colleague, who is also a teacher of the deaf for our service. So we'd like to welcome you to our Listening Champion webinar. We recently delivered this at the Senko Forum and we got lots of positive feedback, so we thought we'd like to share it on a larger platform. So just the purpose of today is to introduce and explain the role of the Listening Champion, to share why we've decided to introduce this role, how this relates to the SEND Code of Practice 2015, and to share some feedback from the schools who've been involved in the 2 pilot schemes that we've already run this year. So I first heard about this, the Listening Champion from Camden, who also have quite a large caseload and only a small number of teachers of the deaf. So they'd already developed the idea. So the Listening Champion would be a staff member who have a greater understanding of hearing impairment and the impact that it has on our students in the mainstream classroom. So this will be achieved by attending additional training with our service and having a recognised role within school that directly supports the needs of our hearing impaired students. So the training so far has included a general deaf awareness, managing their audiological equipment, understanding and using ling sounds, and mental health issues. This is very important. There'll be opportunities to share experiences, to build positive relationships with other schools and our service. So the role of a Listening Champion ultimately is to have an understanding of the impact of deafness, including academic achievement. And we'll discuss how that affects their academic achievement and the impact that that has throughout the course. Also to be aware of the potential mental health issues and how all these problems relate. To have an increased understanding of the social and emotional needs of our HI students, along with their audiological needs. These are very important. Equipment is extremely important to our students, and it's vital that staff that are working with our students have an understanding of how that works. It can be hearing aids, it can be cochlear implants, it might be a bone conduction hearing aid and radio aids, and these all have to be managed. Otherwise they can end up being of detriment to their hearing needs. So this is vitally important. So it is about being able to manage all of that audiological equipment. We would expect them to carry out daily listening and hearing aid checks. So this would involve maybe 5 or 10 minutes in the morning, just having a listen to hearing aids. Obviously, we would expect that they come into school with their hearing aids working, and that's a parental responsibility. But we have to be realistic in for our families. Sometimes that's very difficult. So it would just be someone checking that to make sure that their equipment is working at the start of the day. If they have time, we do suggest doing that also after lunch breaks, just in case batteries have run out during the day, or if there's been any issues with their hearing aids. Sometimes our students, their hearing aids will fall out and they won't necessarily tell an adult. So it's just to have someone who's keeping a check on all of these things. Also, ling sounds. So this is a very quick use of phonetical sounds that can give us some information as to what they're hearing through their hearing aids. So it will let us know if there's any problems. If we're doing this every day, it gives us an opportunity to catch any issues as soon as possible. Obviously, we want to support their independence at managing their own equipment. We have lots of students who find it very difficult to remove hearing aids or to reinsert hearing aids, to alert staff if they're not working, or if batteries run out, or if they have no batteries in them at all. And we will often have students that would sit with the hearing aids in and not working. So it's about encouraging them to manage their own equipment. This also applies to the radio aid, and to inform staff if that isn't working properly or if there are any issues. We also feel that an important part of their role is to keep their colleagues up to date with information and best practice in supporting our HI students. Schools can decide how best to do that. It might be that they have some time during staff meetings just to update teachers, or just to remind teachers about good practice, good classroom strategies, maybe to highlight if they've seen somebody who's been doing something that is helpful. Sometimes, although it's a bit more difficult, it is about talking to staff who we feel maybe aren't using best practice. So it may be that you've noticed that there's a teacher that's not using the radio aid very often. So it's maybe about challenging them in the best way that they feel comfortable with. It may be that they can speak to that teacher directly, or it may involve them speaking to the Senko. But it's just that there's somebody there that's keeping a close eye on best practice for our students. Obviously, we would like the listening champion to be able to liaise with our service if any issues arise. Obviously, we can't get in weekly necessarily, so it's a good link between your school and our service, so that if issues do arise, those students aren't waiting for us to come back into schools. So that again would involve working closely with the teacher of the deaf. So why we feel the listening champion is needed, sort of 4 areas really, is to support the students in becoming successful in the mainstream classroom, the changing role of the teacher of the deaf, to fulfil legislation and the SEND code of practice, and ultimately to empower schools in supporting their hearing impaired students. So why is a listening champion needed? To support hearing impaired students to be successful in the mainstream classroom. This is, ultimately the most important part. I think with hearing impairment, it's a disability that is often misunderstood. It can be an unseen disability. Physically, often you can't see hearing aids, particularly if you've got a student with long hair or a headscarf. You can't see those hearing aids. So it may be that people need to be reminded that that child will find it difficult to hear, particularly in the classroom with background noise. There is also the misconception of hearing devices. So often people will see hearing aids and feel that normal hearing has been restored. This is certainly not the case for our students. So the listening champion we would go through the different types of deafness and how that impacts, just to sort of try and get rid of those misconceptions and to give them the confidence to talk to other people about misconceptions. Our students can also feel very isolated within their own families, socially, within their friendship groups. They can struggle to manage within a mainstream classroom. There's fatigue from listening throughout the day, listening in difficult situations with lots of background noise. By the end of a school day, they can be very, very tired. And again, it's about managing that, maybe having to manage behaviour that could be a result of that. Our students often don't understand or don't know what they are missing. So lots of our students will talk to us about the fact that they can hear and that they don't need their hearing aids because they can hear. And it's about them understanding that, yes, there's things that they can hear, but there's also lots of things that they can't hear. And this is a real problem for our students. And it's about having someone that fully understands that can speak to them about that and that they can talk to. Maybe someone who can sort of demonstrate with their particular loss what things they might struggle to hear, and what situations they might find it more difficult to hear, and what they can do to sort of manage those situations. Lots of our families struggle with the audiological equipment and don't always manage it correctly. Also, this can also come in hand with not accepting the hearing impairment. For our students, they're often the only hearing impaired person within that family. So ultimately, they're a deaf person within a hearing family. And again, that can bring isolation and just being unsure as to where they fit in. So, the listening champion could subtly sort of work with families in helping them to manage the audiological equipment, so that those students are feeling confident that their families know what to do with the equipment, and that they're coming into school with the equipment working, and that it's being used in the school holidays or extended holidays so they can support with that. And also just to help to support their overall health and well-being, so their self-esteem, their confidence, their identity, their ability to be self-advocates. They find this very difficult. So again, it might be actually teaching directly how to tell somebody if you need them to be looking at you so that you can see lip patterns, or to avoid turning their back when they're talking, or to turn the lights on when they've finished watching something on the whiteboard. So it's about helping those students to be able to sort of help themselves in those situations. So why is a listening champion needed? Also, we have the changing role of the teacher of the deaf. So the CRIDE 2017 reports a decreased number of qualified teachers of the deaf. This is due to retirement and also the lack of teachers taking up the postgraduate diploma. So there has been a decrease in the numbers of teachers of the deaf, but unfortunately there's been an increase in the hearing impaired students attending their local mainstream schools. This is because those students that wouldn't attend their mainstream school will be those that may opted for signing, so they may have to attend a school outside of a borough. But currently 78% of hearing impaired students are attending their mainstream schools. This is because this may be due to having cochlear implants, so they have a good access to speech. It's also because there are no schools for the deaf in this borough. There is only one resource base for the primary. They have 24 students, and one resource base for secondary, who currently have 15 students. So we're quite limited in where our hearing impaired students can attend. So we are having to support them more in the mainstream schools. But obviously, our role means that we can't get into them as regularly as we would do if we have more teachers of the deaf. So it's, that's where a listening champion comes into their own. It's somebody that is there, that they can go to on a day-to-day basis for help and support. And if that person can't help them, then they have a direct link to us, and then we will again be able to pick up on any problems or any issues much quicker than if it was just down to us to or for schools to have to wait for us to come back into schools. So overall, our role has become much more advisory, with the emphasis now on supporting and empowering schools. Again, hence why we're offering the listening champion training, and we also offer deaf awareness training for all teachers who have hearing impaired students within their classrooms. So the other reason for needing a listening champion is to fulfil some of the requirements in the SEND Code of Practice and other legislation. So schools must use their best endeavours to make sure that a child with SEN gets the support they need. So these are sort of directly from the Code of Practice. So obviously having a listening champion would help with that, would help to ensure that they are getting the daily support that they need. Obviously, also schools must make reasonable adjustments, including the provision of auxiliary aids to prevent them from being put at a substantial disadvantage compared with their peers. These adjustments must be anticipatory and planned for. Again, if you have someone within the school who can manage equipment, can help to give training to other members of staff, and also just to sort of be thinking ahead in terms of transition and situations where our students might find it difficult, and to make adjustments to make that as smooth as possible. Also, due to hearing impairment being a complex and specific disability, schools should seek advice from a qualified teacher of the deaf to support them to meet the needs of the HI students. Schools should also consider how specialist staff can train the wider workforce so they can better identify need and offer support earlier. So obviously, again, with support from us, we can work closely with your listening champion, and the listening champion can then work more closely with other members of staff within your school. So how did it go? So far, we have run the training twice since September and have reached 19 schools with 23 attendees. These staff members have included a teacher, Senkos, TAs, office staff, SEN support, and a head teacher. So we had a real sort of a good mix across the board of different people working in different areas of the school. Again, it will be down to the school to think about who the best person might be. Obviously, it would need to be somebody that's got an interest in hearing impairment, and somebody that the children can relate to is very important, because this is going to be the person that they sort of go to. Also, a staff member who is approachable and maybe available as well. So if it was a teacher, it may be that during the day that staff member may not be as available as somebody that works in the office or somebody that works in a different area of the school, who may be more available at short notice. It was clear from every week when our listening champions returned for the next part of the training that they were spending more time with the students, and they had already begun to put into practice some of the knowledge and skills that we had discussed within the training. So just having that better understanding of the sort of listening conditions, I think quite a lot of our attendees were sort of quite shocked at the difference between listening in background noise and with reduced background noise, and how the percentages of what those students could hear changed quite dramatically. But this meant that when they went back into schools, they were much more conscious of the levels of background noise, and and were able to sort of control that a lot better. Also, maybe sourcing quieter areas to teach or to work with students, which is also really important for them. As the time went on, we watched our attendees' confidence grow as they began to understand the difficulties that our students face every day, and they then had skills to be able to support them with confidence themselves. And obviously, if they're seeing changes, that increases confidence also. And for that student, then a relationship is starting to build, and if that person is there throughout their school time, then that will be their go-to person. So we noticed an improvement in the communication and relationships with our schools. We had much more regular contact via telephone or emails to ask for advice, or if there were issues with the radio aid, which is fantastic, because we have had in the past that we may return to a school and the radio aid hasn't been used because there was an error code and nobody quite knew who they should call or what to do about it. So unfortunately, that radio aid wasn't being used. Whereas now there is somebody that they can take that radio aid to, and if they will have some of the skills to attempt to rectify any issues themselves, and if they can't do that, then they know that they can contact us, and therefore any issues can be resolved much more quickly. Also, as part of our team, we do have an audiological technician called Hayley Adams, who can come out at short notice to maintain any equipment or to look at any issues that may arise. So again, our listening champions will be aware of that, and they will be able to contact Hayley directly. They also have, we also did a session on troubleshooting. So if there is an issue with whistling hearing aids or molds that are broken, again, they would have a much better idea of what to do next and who to call. It's given us a chance to reflect on how we move forward and improve the support and service we deliver to schools. Obviously, we have noticed the increase in students and our caseloads. So we really feel that if we can sort of push this forward, this idea, and get schools to really get on board, that it will be really empowering for everybody. Just to sort of finish off, we have had some feedback from the schools who have had a listening champion, and we're due to sort of meet again with our second group of attendees to get some feedback from everybody, so that we can share that and hopefully entice other schools to come and get on board and to join the training. The training is free. It runs for 4 weeks. So we run it in the morning and in the afternoon. It's a 2-hour session. So morning would be 9:30 to 11:30. The afternoon would be 1:30 to 3:30. So that allows staff to either come in the morning or the afternoon, depending on when schools can release them. It would run for 4 weeks, and as we said, we cover deaf awareness, mental health issues, troubleshooting equipment, and then at the end we will come in after about half a term just to see how things are going, and we will be in sort of constant contact with our listening champions. So what happens now, if you feel that this is something that would benefit your school, what you would need to do is to nominate a staff member as a listening champion. So as we've already mentioned, this person could be from any area of the school, but ideally someone who is accessible throughout the school day, and also somebody who has an interest in hearing impairment. They will release the listening champion to attend a 2-hour training session once a week for 4 weeks. And as we said, you can choose the morning or the afternoon, depending on what works best for your school. We'd also want schools to support the listening champions with the time that they need to complete daily listening checks and the maintenance of equipment. We anticipate this taking no longer than 10 minutes once this routine has been established. We also suggest that time may be given during staff meetings just to update any sort of changes, or to, as we said before, to highlight good practice, and just to be a bit of a reminder about using good teaching strategies within the classroom for those students. Schools to support them in sharing their knowledge and good practice with others, and allowing them time to liaise with us during our visits. So once we've made an appointment, that the listening champion can be released for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, just so that we can make sure that everything's okay. So I'd just like to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and we really hope that this has been useful, and that, that schools get on board. I will leave this